Open up the door, it's Dave!
Who?
Dave! D-A-V-E!
Dave?
Right, man, Dave.
Dave's not here.
Earlier today, NASA and SpaceX launched the Psyche space probe. It's going to take a look at an asteroid and understand more about the universe. It's a metal asteroid, so we'll understand some more things about the world around us and the universe around us. So it's actually kind of a cool thing. But I took the time to drive up there to see this launch. I wanted to see the launch firsthand. It's a Falcon Heavy launch, which means it's 3 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together. So there's 27 engines on it that give it a lot of escape velocity so it can get into a higher orbit. A single engine, single Falcon 9 will get it into a low Earth orbit that's good enough to get it to the International Space Station to launch satellites that'll be used for like communications and things like that. But to be able to have a deeper space probe, you need a Falcon Heavy with the 27 engines to give it enough thrust to get up there. So I wanted to talk about this in 2 parts. The first is to talk about the trip up there using my Tesla. And the second is to talk about the actual rocket and the rocket science behind it, because there's some cool things that happen I just wanted to share with you. There's a Falcon Heavy launch today. It's the Psyche experiment that's going up. The Psyche is going to go to an asteroid. It's a metal asteroid, and it's going to do some experimentation, figure out what's going on with the asteroid and so forth. So I thought, what the heck, I'm going to drive up and I'm going to see a launch. I set my car to 95% charge before I left, and I got here with about 37%, so I'm in great shape. I can watch the launch, then head on home in a little while. I'll have to stop for 1 charge on the way home, I'm sure, but overall, seems pretty good. Now, the one problem I've got is today, it's a little bit overcast. So, as you can see behind me, that's where the Space Center is. I'm in, Melbourne, which is 35, 40 miles south of the Space Center. So I'm a little bit far away, and with this cloud cover, I don't know what I'm going to see, but I'm going to try it anyway. We're going to give it a shot and see what's going on. I mean, I'm here, so I might as well, right? There are a few cars parked along here. I'm not the only person doing this. As I look up and down the causeway here, there's a few cars, so what the heck, let's see what's going on. So as I noted in that little video, the trip up took a couple of hours. It was about 170 miles or so to get up there. No problem, the battery on the Tesla was just fine. It got me there without any issue. Now the thing is, when I was ready to leave and head home, I wanted to make 1 stop along the way. So I put the stop into the computer and then said I wanted to go home the rest of the way. And it actually had me making 2 stops for charging. The first was going to get me just enough to get to my first destination, and then I'd have to stop again and charge to get home. And I thought that was kind of weird that it did that. So I just stayed at my first charging destination for a little bit longer and made it home just fine with about 10% of my battery left. No problem. That was really no big deal. I just quickly wanted to show you the trip I took up the coast. It's really not a bad trip at all. It's very easy, but it's a little bit long and it's kind of boring. Florida's kind of flat, and sometimes you hit a little traffic, which is just a little inconvenient, but not a big deal. As far as the trip home, it was weird that it wanted me to make 2 supercharger stops, even though I was only going to make 1 quick stop along the way. I don't know why it just didn't have me stop longer at the first supercharger stop, which is what I ultimately did anyway. The trip up there then was really de rigueur. It was sort of something I do all the time. I get in my car, I give it my destination, and I let it figure out where I need to charge, how I need to charge, where I need to stop, and so on. I just let it do it for me. Once in a while, I make sort of an informed decision on the fly where I make a little adjustment and say, hey, I'm gonna stay for longer at this charging station or go to another one. I'll add a destination if I want to and let it figure out what I need to do in order to make that work. But I don't really worry about it. I let the car do most of the work for me and do the worry for me. And I just don't worry about what happens at that point. So it's really pretty easy, and I find it to be pretty straightforward. Now, talking about actually going to see a launch. Now, as I've told you in the past, I actually was a graduate student and was working at NASA for about 18 months during graduate school. So I spent a lot of time at the Space Center. And then I also spent some time there actually seeing launches before I went to graduate school. I lived in Titusville. That was it's across the causeway. There's a place that's in Titusville that's actually got a little marina where you can look out and you can actually see both Launch Pad 39A and B from there. So you really do have a pretty good view. And I lived there for a while and I saw a couple of launches from there. I went up to Satellite Beach. I used to watch the space operations from there. You couldn't actually stay for a launch, but you could actually watch the space operations. That was pretty cool. And then a few times I got a pass to be able to go on NASA property to see a launch even after I wasn't working there anymore. I still had some connections, and I would get somebody to help me get a pass. So it was kind of neat to be able to see these launches. And over the course of several years, I probably saw somewhere around 20 launches. Yeah, they were on and off, and you got in a rhythm of how the launches would go. Maybe they were going to be delayed, maybe they were going to get scrubbed, but you had a feeling for it. It was all space shuttle launches, and you kind of had an idea how they were going to go. And I kind of got in tune with it. Now, the greatest launch I ever saw was the one where I was on the mobile launch platform that's just outside the vehicle assembly building. It's the closest anyone can get to seeing a launch. And it was just a remarkable experience being out there and feeling it and seeing it, because part of the emotional connection you have with the launch is not just about the launch itself, but about the experience of feeling the launch, feeling the power of the rockets as the shockwave hits you, and you're there and you feel it. And then you also can hear the sonic boom if something's returning from space. So I remember several times I would be out there and there would be a shuttle returning from space, and I would hear the sonic boom. And there's an emotional connection to that. It's not just about the visual of the launch. The visual of the launch is cool, don't get me wrong, but the emotional connection of feeling it, that's really what drives me and motivates me, and that's why I wanted to drive up and see a launch. Now, I've been relatively unlucky with SpaceX launches over time, and I've just managed to miss more than I've seen. You know, you go up there and you think, oh, I'm going to see a launch, and then you realize, no, that's going to get scrubbed or delayed, and you don't get to see it. And it happened to me more times than I can count. Even staying here in my house and looking out and trying to see a launch, because sometimes you can see it on a good day, you can get a clear view and you can see it. Even doing that, a lot of times you wind up missing out because it gets scrubbed. So it's kind of an experience, and I went ahead and I drove, the 2 hours-ish to get up there and actually be able to experience the launch. And unfortunately, it was overcast. But that's okay, because again, it was more about the connection, that feeling of the launch, as much as it was actually being able to view it. Now, had it been a clear day, it would have been absolutely awesome and phenomenal. Where I was located, what I was doing would have been just incredible. But unfortunately, it didn't work out quite that well for me, but I still really enjoyed myself. So let's take a look at what I can see versus what you see on NASA TV. Now, I've put a timer up there just to give you a sense of real time what's happening. As I look out toward the clouds, I can't see very much. I should be able to see it at this point because I'm close enough where at the speed of light I should be able to see the rocket, but it takes a few seconds for it to clear the clouds where I can actually see it. So let's bump ahead about a minute and a half on NASA TV. We can see the side booster rockets are about to come off of the space vehicle and return to Earth. Meanwhile, back on Earth at about the same time, here's what's going on. So Falcon Heavy took off this morning with an experimental satellite. Oh, here we go. Here's the rumble. Here's the rumble. You can hear it. Maybe you can pick it up. A couple of cars coming, but I can actually hear the rumble from the rocket now. So it took off a couple of minutes ago. I drove 147 miles, and time for a quick science lesson. Why can I see it in real time, but it takes almost 3 minutes for me to be able to hear it? And this is the same answer that you would get if you're looking at lightning and hearing thunder. The speed of sound is about 760 miles per hour, or about 12.5 miles per minute. We're about 36.5 miles away, and at that speed, that means the sound would reach us in 2.9 minutes. That was cool. That was really cool. So while the cloud cover's a little heavy and we couldn't see very much, I could definitely hear the sonic, the pressure that's coming from the rocket as it takes off. We're about 5 minutes behind when the rocket took off. And I could see just one little trail where it was going up, and then it disappeared behind the clouds. And now I can actually feel it. I can actually hear it. You get the audio portion of it. So that was actually pretty cool. As you can see, it's very overcast today. There's just a little pocket there where I could see a little bit as it was going up, but not very much. But I think you can probably hear it on the audio here too, even though the cars are passing. I think you can probably hear the rocket propulsion still as it was going up. It really does make a sound. That's very cool. And now let's skip ahead again to about 7.5 minutes, when the rockets re-enter the atmosphere and are about to land. Now I'm going to show it first in real time from NASA TV, and then I'm going to switch over and show you my view.
You and I here at Hangar AE, just a couple of miles away from this landing zone, we certainly hear it and feel it.
Yep, and I see now that the side boosters are supersonic, transitioning to transonic.
And that's a shot of the booster through a thin layer of clouds.
We hear the call out for transonic. Landing burn has started.
Here it comes.
I don't know, Daryl, but that sonic boom was great for us. I'm sure Jim is excited over there. There's the second one. I'm sure the host desk over there is feeling that really well.
Literally, our monitors were shaking as both those boosters broke the sound barrier.
And we just heard booster landing confirmed, as we see on the screen, both back landing zone 1 and 2. Everything looks great. And then the call out for
Stage 2 FTS is safe.
Seco 1.
And now backing up and watching it from my point of view with the NASA TV overlay here, you can get a sense of it. A little follow-up science for you. Why did we hear it at the same time they heard it on NASA TV? It has to do with the propagation of a wave. Even though we were standing in a different location, we were the same distance away from the returning rockets. If you think about them up in space and coming back down toward us, they were equidistant but in 3 dimensions. So we heard it at the same time. There's a little bit more. At the end of the video, if you run it back and listen, there's a double boom you hear just as the rockets are landing. And that's because of the breaking the sonic barrier as they come back down, and that's the sound you hear there. But because it's on the ground near where they're landing, that's still 35 miles away, so we don't hear that until about 2.5 minutes later. Wicked cool. Just now, the 2 boosters that are on the outside came back down, and I could hear the sonic boom from both of them as they came through the atmosphere. Now, of course, I can't see them landing. It's just too overcast. Now, the amazing thing to me is I drove all that way to be out on the causeway for about 15 minutes to see the launch. That's all it was like 15 minutes. I looked at the times of my recordings. I was there for 15 minutes. It really wasn't very long, but the emotional connection, that feeling while you're out there was just incredible. Now, had I been able to see it and actually watch it take off and not just see that little streak of it in the sky and then be able to feel it too, that would have been absolutely worth it, and it would have made my day. It would have made it just so special. But it didn't work out that way this time. But I will definitely try again and see if I can catch it another time. Let's talk rocket science for just a moment. So the Falcon 9 rocket with the 9 engines on it gives about 1.7 million pounds of thrust as it goes up into the atmosphere. The Falcon Heavy is 3 rockets, as I mentioned before, so it gives about 5 million pounds of thrust as it goes up the atmosphere. And if you think about the science of all of this and how it works, in order to be able to get out of Earth's atmosphere, to be able to get into space, you have to use the escape velocity. And the escape velocity has a very specific equation that's related to the radius of the Earth and so forth. And there's a way to calculate it all up, and there's some science behind it, and you can do the math and you can figure it out. But you realize that just to get out of the atmosphere takes a lot of energy, But to get further out takes even more. So that's why there has to be 3 rockets to get this space probe much further out so that it can go out there. Now, just to give you the little history here, the pound of thrust is how much energy it takes to get up into space. So you can understand it just a little bit deeper. And then if we look into it, there's some answers about how these things all connect to each other, how to get to low Earth orbit, how to get further out. All of this is well known and well documented, and it's easy to do the calculations if you know what you're doing. So that's why it's really kind of interesting to kind of look at it this way and understand how it works. One last thing. You can see the Falcon Heavy rocket there and what it can lift into space and what its actual thrust output is as compared with other space vehicles.
What's your point, David?